Welcome to your Season 8 draft analysis video with your host Kyle, aka Burditto, and Adam, aka BlackJ32. Will show up later if ever we decide to get on a phone call and re-record this whole thing. So inside this video will be our first impressions of each team. We decided to grade each team based on their first round picks, how well they built around their first round picks. Some other things we looked at were their offense and defensive cores, fire, water, grass cores, dragon, fairy, steel cores. We looked at things like hazards, hazard removal, speed tiers, and then based on the identity of the team, if we thought it was hyper offense or something like balance stall, do you have the necessary other components to do that thing well? So we did that for each team. We gave them grades. Hopefully we'll give you some insight on your team or your opponent's teams. And then at the end, we decided to do a tier listing. So I have been watching a lot of Smash Ultimate tier list videos. And one thing that's, I guess, shares a similar quality with this is that first impression tier lists are different than tier lists should they come out a month, 2 months, 3 months out later. So I think it'll help hone in on the fact that these are first impressions for us. We don't, it's especially when we graded these, it was within 24 hours of the draft. So they're obviously fresh. And as we look at the teams longer, we become more familiar with these teams, or the season progresses and we start seeing what the teams actually do, then our opinions are going to change. I think it's also important to state that everyone drafted really well. This is hands down the best draft we've had. And I think a lot of our coaches, if not all of our coaches, drafted the best teams that they've ever drafted. At the end of the video, we will give that tier list, like I said, and we will show you what our goals for this season are. Hopefully it starts a conversation. I'd like to hear what your goals are, and that's it. So see you shortly. Okay, welcome, Adam.
Hey, Kyle, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So we can just get right started. Virginia Wahoot Hoots coach Andy had the first overall pick with Landers Therian. What do you think about that and how he drafted around it?
Well, I drafted Landorus Therian last time, first round. You can't go wrong with it. It's one of the most versatile Pokemon in the game. One of the best stealth rockers and defoggers, plus Intimidate. It's great. I don't see it as being the top pick overall in the draft, but I know that Coach Andy really wanted to build around it, so I'm glad that he went with it. And then you can kind of see the core that he went with is looking something like Landorus T Rotom Wash. And then maybe you can add like a Mega Houndoom in there to get some pivots into your offense. And again, we see that Andy drafted a bit of a Sun team with Torkoal and Victory Bell. And Mega Houndoom also has solar power, as we saw in the first week. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I think Mew fits right along in there with that. I mean, it takes off some defog pressure for Rotom Wash and some Stealth Rock and defog pressure for Landorus.
Right. Yeah, I think Landorus and Mew actually they do similar things in a lot of ways, which relieves pressure from both of them, like you were saying.
Yeah.
So I think Mew is cool on this team. I like it a lot.
What about hazards, hazard removal, speed tiers, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think so. Mew and Landorus both get hazards. Aside from that, though, and Torkoal has Stealth Rocks as well. I would really like to see some spikes or some T-spikes on this team. I know that that hasn't necessarily been a staple in our league in the past, but I really see this draft as sort of our league pushing forward into a new era of good playing and good team building. And so I think that this is a team, especially with Mega Houndoom as such a cool breaker and things like Darmanitan. I think, and having the sort of pivot potential from Landorus and Rotom Wash to wear down opponents, I really see this as, I don't know, it would be nice to have some other hazards, but some great defoggers. And then all three of those also have removal, which is really nice. And then looking at speed tiers, I think Andy really has his bases covered between 70 and 100, which, as you'll see later in this analysis, a lot of coaches have a huge gap between those two. So I think that's great, but it does sort of suck to have base 115 as your top speed Pokemon and that being your Mega, which means you can't Scarf it. And then the next Pokemon below that is Mew at base 100 speed, and Mew is commonly run as defensive. So I see these speed tiers as being relatively weak, even considering that Victory Bell can get a speed boost from that Sun move ability.
Chlorophyll.
Chlorophyll, that's the one. So
Yeah.
even regardless of that, I still see these speed tiers as being relatively weak, and I hope that I suspect that Andy will find often he is like, oh, I have to run Darmanitan Scarf again. I have to run Landorus Scarf again. I have to run Rotom Scarf again.
Yeah. Any of those top ones, Mew, Darmanitan, Landorus, and Rotom. Like obviously, Darmanitan is fine as a choice scarfer, but you might not want to run that every week. And I don't. I mean, it sucks to have that pressure put on Mew and Landorus, and even Rotom, which you want to be a good defensive pivot for yourself.
Exactly. So I also see, Andy has some cool pivots, but also with Landorus, one thing that I noticed having it last season is that it sucks when it shares a weakness with things, and it's weak to ice and water. And so I'm a little bit surprised that Andy drafted a Sun team, which consists of fire and grass Pokemon, which are weak to ice and water. So he has, what is this? 1, 2, 3 ice, or 3 water weaknesses, 4 if you count 4 water weaknesses, and then in Landorus, Darmanitan, Mega Houndoom, and Torkoal, and then Victory Bell, Gourgeist, and Landorus are all weak to ice.
And Como-O.
Yeah. That's like almost the entire team except for Snorlax, Gramble, and Rotom Wash.
Yeah, so if you try to beat Landorus offensively, then you're kind of covering your bases for more than half of his team.
Yeah. So I guess if I had some advice for coaches, I would say, yeah, make sure that you're building to check Landorus, and I think you'll find success checking the rest of his team. Also, without the Sun, I think this team falls apart. I think it's a little bit because there, so many fire and grass Pokemon. The way that you sort of overcome that is by having it be an awesome Sun team. And while Andy can field a non-Sun team, I think he's going to find that he wants to bring Torkoal most weeks, and then he feels like he needs to bring Victory Bell and Mega Houndoom just because they complement the Sun. So I think taking out Torkoal is going to be really key. And so things like Taunt or Knock Off to get rid of the Heat Rock are going to be great. So look for some cool counter leads when your matchup with Andy comes.
Yeah. So I agree. I guess when in my grading, I think I thought that his non-Sun team was pretty good, but it's just this. It would be the same 6 or so Pokemon. I don't really know. We'll see if he can use Snorlax well. I don't know if it really fits on his Sun team, which usually means you have to have a lot of like offensive pressure going on, and on his non-Sun team, I just don't. We'll see. I think that he could use potentially a different fairy. He could use maybe a cleric, or he could use some speed. So I guess looking at his team, if I was doing that, I'd be like, well, what's Snorlax going to do for you, buddy? But that's kind of it with me. I also, last thing I'll say is that I feel like not that you need classic cores, but he really doesn't have a Dragon Fairy Steel core. He has Como-O and a low tier fairy and Granbull, but Granbull doesn't really provide the things that most fairies provide. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
It's also pretty non-traditional. I ended up giving it a B minus, and this is mainly because I can't really see what's going on here. Keep in mind, last season, I didn't think Andy's team was that great, and halfway through the season, I thought it was the best team that was drafted. So with these non-traditional teams, you'll see my grading is lower because these are first impressions.
Yeah, and I gave this team a B overall. I think it's cool, but definitely I wouldn't consider it one of the best drafts necessarily, because again, this was an insanely good draft. So we'll get to some of those. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about the Baltimore Braviaries?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and say it. This is my favorite team overall.
Yeah, it's mine too.
Oh, cool. So I think Megalodios is a very good second pick overall, and I think he drafted a really good team around it. I mean, you could even take Megalodios out of his draft, and I think that he has a good draft. He has a Firewater Grass Core defensive one of Toxapex, Tangrowth, Arcanine, and he also has a Dragon Fairy Steel Core with the Latios, Diancie, and Lucario. And Diancie and Lucario share some weaknesses, but I think even just Lucario and Latios as two premier offensive Pokemon of their type will be really cool. Some other cores that he has that Regenerator core with Toxapex Tangrowth. He also has some good Volt Switch U-turn with the top of his speed tiers. And he has that Intimidate core that Andy had last season with Arcanine and Crocodile. So
Yeah, it's kind of. I was very impressed when I saw this team for the first time. Just sort of how many different ways things combine to be really impressive. And yeah, tell me a little bit about the hazards and the speed.
yeah, so hazards and hazard removal. He has a lot of hazards. He has toxic spikes. He has leech seed. He has a couple rockers. And for um, removal, he has Swellow. He has Latios. But the
He also
perks
has
of
Cloister as
his
a rapid spinner.
yeah, yeah, Cloister. The perks of his team though is he has some good setters and he has a regenerator core. So I don't see very often that, like, let's say you have to trade rocks or something like that with someone. I think that he wins that. He would rather they have rocks and he have rocks than his opponent more often than not. So I think that his defog or his removal could be a little better, but I like it. I also think that looking at his speed tiers, that they're pretty great. He has a little bit of a gap between like 70 and 90. But honestly, he really covers the whole spectrum. If there's one thing that maybe if I can pull out a critique, I would say that having something at base 100 would be helpful for him. I think that especially because honestly, I would like to run some bulky Arcanine sets, and so not having to run too much speed would have been nice. Same with Crocodile some weeks. So having something at base 100, I think would have freed up those two a little bit.
I think
But I like it.
Yeah, I think one thing for me about this team that um, I think it'll really depend on how Colin plays it. Because on the one hand, if you take it at face value, if you just look at the names, to me it looks a little bit hazard weak. Like Jolteon, not weak to hazards, but doesn't love to switch into them a lot.
Hmm.
And same thing with Swellow, same thing with Arcanine, same thing with Cloister, hazards break, Focus Sash, which is a common set. But I think you're really right to point out that Toxapex and Tangrowth can kind of just go back and forth for days, and not really worry about hazards and really force a lot of switches. So I think if Colin plays it well, he can really play around this weakness, which I listed as like the main drawback of the team. The first few times I looked at it, but I think the more I'm seeing, the more I realize that it could actually not be a huge problem. Lucario quad resist stealth rocks, so you can
Right.
get in some of these
It's a
things for really cheap.
as offensive as you think of Megalodios and things like Crocodile can be, and Lucario. This is really kind of a a balanced team, but more on the offensive side of balance, because he's going to win through his defensive cores and getting in his Megalodios freely, getting in his whatever his Scarfer is or his choice band user freely. But it's really going to be a lot about, I think, making sure that defense stays healthy, getting in those breakers. He maybe doesn't have much of a sweeper unless he's going to run like Dragon Dance
Clois-
Latios or something like
Set up
that.
Cloister, I
Um,
guess.
oh yeah, I guess and Lucario, but so yeah, I think it's if it's somewhere between bulky offense and balance, I would call it a balanced team. And I had to learn how to play balance last season, so and it had a learning curve to it. So I expect a learning curve with Colin as well because it's kind of a hard play style to get good at. You don't usually have just the like straight up offense that other teams have, and you kind of need offense though because you're not just going to win straight on defense.
Right.
So
Yeah, but overall, I rated this as my best team in the draft. I gave it an A.
yeah, and I gave it an A minus as my best team in the draft too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Great.
the next team is the Coach Brian's Washington Hippopotas. So tell me what you think about first round pick Tapu Koko and the cores that he brought with it.
Yeah, well, first off, I'm really excited for Coach Brian. He last season, I believe, got sniped taking. He wanted to take Tapu Koko in the first round, and was sniped the pick right before. So I'm really excited he was able to get to it this season. And of course, he drafted the classic Tapu Koko Halucha core, which is really fun. You'll see on the ladder with Halucha will run Electric Seed. So that's really cool. And he also and Halucha is one of I would call the most fearsome setup mons in the game right now. And he drafted a fearsome setup mon on the other side of the spectrum with Volcarona.
Yep.
Both
And Suicune.
and Suicune, which is just that Calm Mind Rest set. Oh my gosh.
Right.
And Mega Venusaur, which Andy has called the team that he will always lose to, is the team that has Mega Venusaur. So I think this is a really fun team. Suicune Gligar is maybe not as strong of a defense as Andy had last season with Suicune Tangrowth, but I see it being sort of strong in similar ways where they cover each other's weaknesses. Like Suicune can come in on those ice hits, and Gligar can come in on the electric moves. And
Yep.
yeah, which is cool. That's like a neat thing you want in defense. And Tapu Koko really functions. I think because of Halucha and Volcarona on this team, and Kyurem as a breaker, Tapu Koko can really be whatever it needs to be. It can run utility a lot more often. So things like Volt Switch and be coming in specifically to set up electric terrain, which, obviously has a lot of implications with Halucha. But even, he could run Electric Seed on Volcarona or something like that, or Suicune. So don't
Right.
sleep on that.
So what do you think about these speed tiers? They seem very speedy.
These speed tiers, I think, are great. I think so. Brian doesn't have any noticeable speed gap between 70 and 130, which is awesome. That's really, really impressive. I think it's the best speed in the game, or not in the game, but in our draft. But one thing that means is you can sort of, if you're prepping against Brian, you can kind of say, okay, well, he has the best speed in the game. I'm not going to win on speed. So why am I going to try, I'm not going to try and scarf something to outspeed Coco. And even my Scarfer isn't going to outspeed Unburden Halucha. And so don't try and win by outspeeding things, or Volcarona after it sets up. Don't try and win by outspeeding things. So like really put your EVs in defense and HP and things like that, and figure out, what can take hits from what. One thing that I actually just noticed, so I have Kyurem Black on my team and Brian has Kyurem, and having this speed that he has is really he's never gonna have to run Choice Scarf Kyurem, which is a huge, huge plus, because one of the reasons Kyurem is all the way in tier 3 is that a lot of times to be effective, it really needs to run Choice Scarf. So I think that's going to make Kyurem way scarier than we've seen it in the past.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that so his team, if I had to give it an identity, it's a hyper offense team.
Yep.
And so with that HO, it's a lot about never letting up and winning before they have a chance to catch their breath. And so I think his Dragon Fairy Steel Core, while none of them are setup sweepers, Tapu Koko, um, Metagross, and Kiram, none of them are really his setup sweepers. They really give him that forward momentum early on, so that they can kind of like chip down. Haluch is great. Haluch kind of needs a little bit of chip damage to sweep. Volcarona is great. It might need that one thing taken out first. And same with Suicune. Like find whatever grass type or something is in there to check Suicune. You might want to get rid of that first before you can get Suicune going. And so having Kyurem, Metagross, and Coco there to kind of do that work early on, I think will be really good for this type of hyper offense team.
Yeah, one thing I think that it's worth noting about this team as a weakness, I see at least, is that it doesn't have great hazard removal.
Yep.
Coco has defog. I guess Halucha does Halucha get defog, but you're never going to run it.
Yeah.
And Gligar gets defog, and it's I think Coco is great, and this team is built around Coco, and that it doesn't need to be any particular sort of offense. But I think it maybe is shoehorned into being a defog Pokemon most weeks, and just coming in,
Hmm.
setting terrain, clicking defog, and dying to even something slow that can pack a punch. So, um, yeah, I think, and especially on a team with Volcarona, on a team with Frostlass, um, yeah, I think, and sort of the pivot that Coco provides, I think that hazard removal is actually quite important. Kyurem as well really appreciates Stealth Rocks being removed. So if there were one thing that Brian could do better, I think it would be that.
Yeah, I think you're right that if he could, because so if I'm looking at his team and he only brings Coco and doesn't bring Gligar, and he also has something like Volcarona in there, then I'm expecting that Coco is a defogger. And or if he doesn't bring Coco and he brings Gligar, I'm expecting it to run defog. And so I think yeah, having one other thing would um, help his opponent. I guess it would just kind of obfuscate some of the roles of his team for his opponent.
Right. Which is
So
important in the most versatile Pokemon like Coco.
yeah, I think with if you're not going if you're running hyper offense and you're not going to have defog, then I think that Frostless is a really great tier 4 because it's base 110 speed and it's a taunter, so you can really get up one spike. And then taunt and maybe Destiny Bond or something, and really just start that avalanche going without that defog or without the hazard setter on your opponent's side, even being able to get up hazards. So
Mhm.
there's some cool things on this team for sure. I guess one of those weaknesses, like I said, would be hazard removal, and also I think it's like hyper offense is a little bit harder of a team to win with than it seems. It's not as simple as just get in something and click buttons until it dies. You really have to prioritize, figure out early on what needs that necessary chip damage before I bring in my sweeper. So I think that's something Brian will learn, something that I feel like he was learning last season as well, where it was like, okay, can I get up a nasty plot with my Thunderous now, or is it a moot point because he's just going to bring in the check next turn or with Infernape or something like that. So I think this will really challenge his playing, and I think he'll get a lot better at prioritization and stuff with this type of team.
Yeah. So overall, I gave this team a B plus. I think this is one of my favorite teams of the draft. I'm really excited to see how Coach Brian uses it.
Yep,
Um,
I gave it a B plus too.
oh, great. All right. So I think the next team we're going to be talking about is the Orlando Magikarp. First round pick was Megalodios, I believe. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I love it. I asked specifically if I could talk about Ben's team because I really like his team because I really like Megalodios. It, along with Megalodios, because of our clause that you can't draft the non-mega if the mega is drafted and vice versa, become semi-busted in our league. probably the biggest check to Mega Latios is Latios, and the biggest check, one of the biggest checks to Mega Latias is Latias. So having those come off the board whenever you draft one of them is pretty insane. And Mega Latias, where it's not the the wall breaker that its counterpart is, it is a defensive monster. Like honestly, oftentimes if you just put in 252 EVs into HP, there are maybe only three Pokemon on your opponent's team that can do over half. And with recovery moves and stuff like that, Megalodios can last for a long time. And so the team that he built around it, I think, is pretty awesome. I think he has a really, really great Dragon Fairy Steel Core. Having Cobalion Megalodios last season, I loved how well they synergized. I loved having a Defogger in one of them and a Stealth Rocker in the other one. I love how many resistances they have together, and like how those synergize. And then what is his fairy? And Togekiss is really cool in that too. Also being something that's off the ground, helping out Cobalion. I think that core he could bring to every game, and it will be really tough to break through. And then for his Fire, Water, Grass core, I think you can do something. I don't know if this was intentional, but one thing you can do when you have Megalodios is you don't really need a the best defensive grass type, because any single monotype grass Pokemon, Megalodios is either resisting or immune to everything that grass types normally become the like defensive switch into. And then so it's fire type and it's water type, with Incineroar and Araquanid, I think are two very unique Pokemon and kind of round out that five Pokemon core of just unique defensive Pokemon to work with. So
Yeah, and I think when I first Ben picked Zeraora in a later round, and when I first saw that pick, I was like a little bit skeptical. But the more we're highlighting how defensive his team is, I think something like Zeraora really packs a punch and makes it's a threatening mon that you can keep in the back, and you can slow you turn in with things like Incineroar, or things like Cobalion if they have somebody faster, and so. That's like a really scary threat on a team that's this kind of bulky and versatile.
yeah, and it's honestly with its staple is its speed. Its attack stat and special attack stat are fine, but it's also pretty bulky too. So it has the staying power to last on a balanced team. And not only that, he has things like Blissey and Megalodios that can wish pass to it, if he wants to.
Mm-hmm.
So for hazards, honestly, I feel like half of his team sets hazards. Cobalion, Blissey, Piloswine, Cofagrigus,
Yeah.
Araquanid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think Tangela gets at least Leech Seed. So, and then for remove, so I gave that an A. I gave his removal a B plus because it's mainly Togekiss and Megalodios. Is that it? I think that's it.
Yes, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I would like something that isn't part of his like awesome Dragon Fairy Steel Core to also have removal. But that's fine. So like those are especially Megalodios is a really really good defogger. So I gave it a B plus, somewhere that or a B. If I could, I guess so. Going to the speed tiers, I think the speed tiers for me aren't as limiting as you think, Adam, because I had a balanced team like this last year, and my biggest complaint about the speed tiers wasn't that it was that they were too slow, which they were, but it's that Megalodios was my only fast thing. So I think Zeraora really being up there at the top, um, I think rounds out his speed tiers, and I think he has the speed tiers where it counts. He doesn't have to run Scarf Cobalion every week. He doesn't have to run Scarf Mienshao. But maybe there could be some more Pokemon in that range that you really like.
Yeah, well, the range is between 105 and 60, and he only has
Yep.
one Pokemon in that range, which is Togekiss. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see that as being, to me, that's a huge problem. in terms of speed tiering. And uh, a lot of offensive Pokemon, things like Nidoking, things like Lucario, things like Arcanine, can
Darmanitan.
Darmanitan can run just the most bulky set ever, and they can completely get away with it um, against Ben's team. And so I think that's going to be a real problem for him later in the season. Who cares if you don't have to run Scarf Cobalion, but like if I could run, bulky Arcanine, you're gonna have a big problem. Um,
It might be something that mid-season, he's looking at his slow Pokemon and he's like, okay, what don't I need? What haven't I brought yet? Something like Tangela or Kofagrigus. If he doesn't find himself bringing it, he doesn't need the best thing inside that speed tier, but patching that up with maybe and something that has some immediate offense. Because right now I think his immediate offensive Pokemon naturally are Mienshao and Zeraora. So maybe even getting something in that speed gap that's in the special that's a special attacker could maybe take this draft to the next level.
yeah, and maybe it's too much to ask, but if that thing also had a rapid spin or some, maybe defog or something, I think, yeah, that would also be really beneficial to this team.
Yeah,
So what
cool.
do you think of it overall?
So I gave it a B plus. I think that this team is a good example of what a balanced team should be, and I think it's better than the team that I won the championship with last season. And so yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I gave it a B. I think it's great. It's a really fun team.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that I think it matches Ben's style too. This is the first time he didn't draft Vaporeon, and so I think he likes his Pokemon that are thick. I think Mega Latios is almost a Mega Cresselia, and he has some. So yeah, I think it's not only is it a good draft, it also similar to Brian's team matches a play style that we've seen them succeed in. So I expect him to do really well with this.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Why don't we talk about that a new team, that Anchorage Ninetales?
Yeah, so what was it?
Yeah,
Megalopunny was
Megalopunny was the first pick.
fifth overall. I think that's a cool pick. I think that it's our yeah, just what is it? I think that with its ability, Scrappy, I don't think there is anything that resists both of
No,
its
no.
stab moves. So that's really cool. And Megalopunny we've seen in the league before. We've seen it successful in the league before, and he drafted a pretty interesting team around it. If I were to, I guess, talk about an offensive core, it would be like fighting Bug Psychic with Megalopunny, Scolipede, and Victini, which definitely isn't a traditional core. Um, and I'm just really, it's not even that I'm hesitant about it. I'm just curious about it. I have no idea how it's going to do against some of the teams that we've already mentioned.
Yeah, I called it almost. I was trying to figure out what type of team it was, and we've mentioned like hyper offense and balance. And I couldn't come up with a name, sort of because it's this non-traditional sort of thing, and so I called it like an overwhelmed style, where it really reminds me of Andy's season 4 draft, where he had I believe it was Mega Gallade and Gyarados and Salamence, and so it's a whole bunch of Pokemon that do the same thing pretty well. Things like Megalopunny and Scolipede.
And by that, you mean our physical attackers.
Right, exactly. So Megalopunny,
Yeah.
Scolipede, Victini, I see all of those as sort of go wall breakers. And so it's sort of the case that if you only have one thing that can, sort of trade with a physical wall breaker, then you're going to be blown open by the other two.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the
Yeah,
strategy, I think.
I think that really shows itself if you look at the special attack column where um, he only has one Pokemon with a special attack greater than 100, and that Pokemon's special attack is its weaker of its two offensive stats.
Right.
So he might find some utility in using Victini as a special attacker. Victini still has a wide enough move pool that you can use it for its special attacks, but obviously it's like signature moves are all on the physical side. Um, so yeah, if there's something that I would maybe look for in a future version of this team after trades, it would be to really get at least one special attacker. Looking at his Dragon, Fairy, Steel cores, Firewater, Grass cores, I gave those like lower grades. I gave them C pluses because they're not really, this team isn't really built around those, so they don't look that impressive. And so maybe it's a problem with our grading scale, but he doesn't really have that defensive of a fairy. And I think that his team tends to be pretty ground weak, even though he has things like Electros and Cresselia. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's some more about his cores. What were you gonna
yeah.
say?
Looking at his speed tiers a little bit, I actually see these as being really, really good. 135 for Mega Lopunny, and then Scolipede with speed boost. So you have the top clearly covered. And the biggest speed gap is between 185, which is not nearly as bad as.
But it is But it is. I mean, 85 and 78 are Cresselia and Blastoise,
Right.
which aren't Pokemon that you want to be your fast
That's true.
Pokemon. So out of Pokemon that would run max speed, it's like Victini to Tyrantrum.
Right. So yeah, there are definitely some concerns there.
They're there. Yeah, they're definitely
Mm-hmm.
there. But and honestly, his kind of like Brian's team is a team that is going to win having that upper like almost like the ceiling of the speed tiers covered
Right.
that other teams maybe only have one Pokemon at.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's where he's going to get a lot of his speed, like a lot of that pressure from.
Right. And one thing that I really like with these speed tiers is that so on the lower end he has Stakataka, Carnivine, Electros, and you can even run no speed Tyrantrum. And Stakataka and Cresselia both set Trick Room. And so I think
Yep.
one thing
And Victini.
and Victini.
I think.
Yeah, so you could even run a slow Victini, like a really bulky slow Victini with Trick Room. And so I think it's so cool that yeah, you have both the top and the bottom. You can outspeed and outslow people. And I think a lot of people are going to run into trouble against these mix-ups, or they prepare for, oh, how can I outspeed some of these things? And then they get outslowed, but all their Pokemon are Choice Scarfed and no defense EVs. So
I had Stakataka once without another Trick Roomer, and I really wish like Stakataka will shine a lot more on a team where it doesn't have to be the thing that runs Trick Room. Yeah, I think you're right. It has the top and it has the bottom, which is good.
yeah. Overall,
So yeah, with maybe the what I see as the ground weakness, with maybe needing a special attacker and not really knowing about its cores because they're not based around traditional cores. I went ahead and gave it a C. It has some room to grow for me.
yeah, I gave it a C plus for a lot of the same reasons. Just sort of things hitting on the same side, but like a lot of things hitting on the physical side. Yeah, and yeah, just some various things like that. But I'm excited to see how things turn out.
Yeah, and it really won't take much for this to be a very, very, very scary team.
Right.
So this is just a first impression too. So if there's some synergy here that I don't see right away, then I'm excited to see that.
Yeah.
So the next up we have Coach Connor and the Keurig Na Hirin. I know that's wrong. I know there's like maybe some V's in there or something like that. But Coach Connor drafted Dragonite as a round one pick. What did you think about that, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I had spoken with Connor beforehand, and I knew to expect this Dragonite pick from him. But I don't necessarily see it as an abstractly good round one pick. But since Dragonite has multi-scale, and it is a very particular type of mon, as you highlighted, and don't sleep on these. And so I think if it got sniped, then that's a huge problem for Connor, who wanted to build a team around it. So I see it as, a good first round pick for that reason. And what a team he built around it. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it's like the only reason to draft something earlier than it should be drafted is if you build a great team around
Yeah.
it.
And look at this Dragon Fairy Steel Core. Dragonite, Florges, Mega Steelix. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Florges is an insane special wall. Mega Steelix has 230 defense. That's crazy. And Mega Steelix is Steel Ground, which I thought was a really common typing. It's actually not. It's Mega Steelix in a Lowland Dugtrio and maybe one other thing is all that is
Yeah.
Steel Ground. So it doesn't have a quad weakness, which things like Stack Attacker really suffer from.
Suffer from.
And so, and Dragonite gets defog, though you probably wouldn't want to run it. Florges gets defog. Mega Steelix gets Stealth Rock. So it's just a great, Dragon Fairy Steel Core. And then you look at things like Slowbro and Mega Steelix cover each other's weaknesses almost perfectly. And Slowbro, Sarina, Blaziken is a fun offensive, or I guess it's a fun Firewater Grass core. With Slowbro has Regenerator, Zarina has Hazard Removal in Rapid Spin, and then Blaziken, I believe, has some sort of setup, Agility or something like that. And because Speed Boost is
Yeah, I
banned.
think it gets. I think it gets agility and sword
Right,
stance.
which is really cool. It also has Defog, which is kind of fun. It's a bird Pokemon,
Yeah.
right? Like Torchic is a bird,
Yeah.
so
And baton pass if he wants some momentum. From
yeah,
it.
don't baton pass that that agility though.
Yeah.
So, and one thing that I think makes this team built so well around Dragonite is, like I said before, Dragonite has the multi-scale ability, which halves damage if it's at full health, and that means it's really weak to entry hazards, or entry hazards cripple it. And so, if you have a team, with Dragonite and you want Dragonite to really shine, you need to have an exceptional entry hazard removal. So, who did he pick? He picked Whimsicott, Prankster Defog, Cryogonal, which is a pretty great special wall in Tier 5 with Rapid Spin.
And Defog. Yeah, it gets both.
Oh, does it have Defog also? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Blaziken, a fire type with Defog. That's crazy. His Cleric, Florges with Defog, and Sarina with Rapid Spin. And there's nothing that's going to hit all 5 of those. And 2 Rapid Spinners too, which lets things like Nihilego set up Stealth Rocks, lets Mega Steelix come in Nihilego set up T-Spikes, Mega Steelix set up Stealth Rocks, and then you're really good to go. And you can kind of be switching back and forth between Slowbro and Mega Steelix, Slowbro like with Regenerator, and come into Florges. And Florges can always Wish Pass into Dragonite to bring it back up to full. And
right, you don't even need to get rid of hazards if you don't want to. If you can only expect that you're only going to have one turn left of Florges before it goes down, you can just get up the Wish, bring in Dragonite, and then maybe it takes rocks damage and an incoming attack, but then it's at full after the Wish.
Right. Yeah. So I love this team, and I think looking at the speed, it's okay. It suffers from it has some good. It has what is that 5 Pokemon above base 100, which is kind of fun. But again, we see that speed gap from 103 to 80, which to me is kind of a lot. Even though, I mean, Nihilego and Dragonite are both offensive, so you're going to be running speed on those. So maybe it's not as big of a problem.
And Blaziken.
Yeah, and Blaziken. So
yeah, I think it's good. The more I look at his team, the more I like it. I think that it's one thing that you didn't touch on is that he didn't draft Whimsicott to be his fairy Pokemon or his grass Pokemon. And I mean, in Draft League, we always kind of talk about you want to grab as many types as you can. But I think it's really cool that he found a way to double up on grass types and fairy types, and kind of what that does is I think that frees Whimsicott up to be that quirky thing that it is, and not a fairy type or grass type.
Right.
So
yeah.
Is there anything that maybe you think could be better about this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say patch your speed tiers. That's sort of a big thing for me personally. Other than that, I would say, I don't know. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
This team keeps growing on me. I rated it a B. It might be a B plus now. This kind of proves that first impressions only mean so much. But yeah, so I really like this team. I don't think the speed tiers were as much of a fault in my grading as Adam. You'll kind of notice if there's a gap in speed, then you can think of a half a letter grade down from Adam.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I gave it a B minus, which sort of settles on that. But again, I think the more that I gave that rating on Monday, and it's Friday now, and I don't know, it keeps growing on me.
Great. So why don't you talk about Columbus Mercrew and Coach Kyle's first round pick, Tapu Bulu?
Tapu Bulu. I think this is very similar to Dragonite, where we've only had one or two people ever draft Tapu Bulu in our league. So to me, maybe in other leagues it's considered a first round pick. In our league, I consider it very safe to where you could have left it to a later round. And I noticed you also have Jirachi on your team, which is to me more of a first round pick and more likely to go. So I think you had some choosing to do of whether Bulu goes first or Jirachi. But I think it makes sense to have drafted Bulu first because of the way that you made your team. And so you made your team, Tapu Bulu summons grassy terrain, obviously, and you made your team with that clearly in mind. Grassy terrain halves damage from moves that shake the ground, which is some but not all ground types. For example, it's not Thousand Arrows is not nerfed by grassy terrain
Or Earth Power.
or Earth Power from Nidoqueen. So it's Zygarde 10% and Nidoqueen that are two ground types on his team that can use ground moves at full power.
All three of my ground types: Mega Camerupt, Nidoqueen, and Zygarde.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's so fun. Wow. It does give you quite an ice weakness there, though, with Bulu, Nidoqueen, Zygarde, 10%. Which I guess you have some good switch-ins for, like Jirachi and Vaporeon and things like that. Some other things that are cool. I guess Bulu Jirachi is neat. Bulu summons terrain, which keeps Jirachi healthy, and then Jirachi can wish pass to Bulu. Jirachi can come in on poison hits. Bulu can come in on ground hits. They both can tank dragon moves, which is great. So yeah, you're my Kieran Black. I don't know what I'm gonna do against this team.
So what about hazards? What about my speed tiers?
Oh yeah, hazards are great. I think this is one of the best hazard setting drafts that we have.
Yeah.
Greninja gets spikes and T-spikes, which is amazing. Jirachi is like one of the best stealth rockers, I think. Nidoqueen is also one of the best stealth rockers, and Druddigon gets stealth rocks. Guys, Druddigon is so good. We should have put it in the Don't Sleep on These podcast, even though it's tier 4. It gets glare. Its abilities are sheer force, mold breaker, and rough skin. 3 of like the best abilities. So look for a Rocky Helmet rough skin set. Look for sheer force life orb set. Look for mold breaker, things like earthquake. Your Rotoms are not safe.
Or stealth rock with magic bounce users.
Exactly. It also gets glare, which is one of the best moves in the game. And I think we'll see Druddigon and Zygarde 50% using glare a lot this season. Because glare hits it's a 100% chance to paralyze, and it hits ground types.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I think Druddigon's really cool. I just want to talk a little bit about some of your tricks. I'm going to give them away.
Cool.
Which hopefully
and then afterwards we can talk about how bad my hazard removal is. But talk about my tricks first.
Oh yeah, your hazard removal sucks. I think it's. Did I say it was the worst in the draft?
It should be.
I don't know.
I mean, my 2 setup sweepers with a well, I guess they're not sweepers, but Hitmonlee and Drifblim both have Unburden, and so the reason I drafted them was for the kind of like for the same reason someone would draft Halucha. Those are my only 2 removers, so it's like the last Pokemon that you see on the field is removing hazards.
Yeah, so it doesn't make any sense. I think I had one team rated lower than you, which we'll get to. But yeah, it's kind of bad. They're 2 low tiers, and your team is sort of weak to something like spikes. It's not really weak to stealth rocks, but remember Jirachi, steel types aren't don't resist spikes. And Tapu Bulu doesn't resist spikes. So
Right.
Vaporeon doesn't resist spikes. So that could be a way to I don't know, really stack up damage on this team, especially with Greninja and Jirachi clicking U-turn and Bulu switching in and out to keep setting terrain and things like that.
And I think I have quite a bit of ground weak Pokemon that so obviously that gets patched up when terrain is up, but that really without that I feel like I'll I'll be leaving some things at home during some weeks that I would usually bring just so that I don't have half of my team weak to ground and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So
Yeah.
that's gonna be a problem, and I've kind of thinking about trades. That's something. It's like okay, I should probably get another defogger, which would help out with that ground weakness.
Yeah. So looking at some of the tricks, so obviously unburden Halucha we saw with electric terrain that Tapu Koko sets. You can do the same thing with unburden Hitmonlee and unburden Driftblim and Tapu Bulu. So Bulu sets grassy terrain. They can run grassy seed, which I believe I forget what it does. Defense maybe, or I don't know. It's one of those. Um,
I think it's defense.
yeah, so that's pretty cool. Something else, there's a move called Nature Power that Mega Camerupt gets. And we saw it featured in week 1. It was kind of fun. Mega Camerupt O-Code Suicune. Who would have thought? Nature Power. And it also killed Halucha.
Halucha.
That was so fun.
So far it's used Energy Ball and Thunderbolt.
Yeah, so Nature Power becomes a different move in certain terrain. So in grassy terrain, Nature Power, you use Nature Power and it uses Energy Ball instead of Nature Power. And in electric terrain, you use Nature Power and it uses Thunderbolt instead. And I believe it's Moonblast in misty terrain.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool. So your water types are not... So Mega Camerupt is sort of like things like Arcanine or Heatran that can use Z Solar Beam to kind of nuke your water type. So really look out for that with Mega Camerupt. That's pretty nasty. I'm trying to think of some other tricks.
More of my tricks, eh?
Yeah. I don't know. Do you have any? Oh,
No.
There's an item called Terrain Extender that nobody ever uses. I've never seen anybody use it, but watch for Kyle to use it. Just because of how central grassy terrain is to his team. So it's an item. It sort of like functions like Damp Rock or Heat Rock, where it makes terrain last longer in the same way that those make weather last longer.
Yeah. That's about all that I want to talk about my team. I guess another thing, Mega Camerupt is only weak to ground and water, and its ground
Rock?
weakness is patched. Nope, not with second typing. So its ground weakness is patched with grassy terrain, semi, and then its water weakness is still quad, but I have Vaporeon, which has water absorb. So there's some cool synergy there. So you may not just be able to run HP water on Pokemon and expect to knock out Camerupt.
Yeah. So, one piece of advice I have for people would be use the terrain against Kyle. So obviously feel like knowing about how grassy terrain works, so you can run Earth Power at full attack. But also, you can run Grassy Seed too. And that would
dare you.
Yeah, it would let you switch into things like Zygarde 10%. I actually predicted that Brian would run Grassy Seed Halucha first week.
That would have been terrible.
So, anyway, yeah. Good luck to people against Coach Kyle. It's one of my favorite teams. I think I rated it as my second favorite team.
And he had a great first impression of it. I think just because I've been looking at it longer, I rated it lower. Given my ground weakness without Tapu Bulu, and given the fact that I need some other hazard removal options. I gave it a B.
I gave it an A-. But also, oh no, did I? Yes, I gave it an A-. But we forgot to touch on speed tiers, and I just want to say real quick, there's no huge gap. There's a little bit between Zygarde 10% and Jirachi, and then you're probably going to want to run Jirachi a little bit bulkier. And so I see a little bit of a gap between base 115 and base 87. With
It's a faster team than I'm used to.
yeah, so I'll be curious how you handle that. Um,
Cool.
yeah. All right. Now, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Houston Haxorus, one of my favorite teams?
Yeah, so Ian's team, he drafted first round Tapu Fini. I think this is a team that's also kind of centralized around one Pokemon. It's centralized around his not his first round pick. It's centralized around Haxorus. So, but I think that Tapu Fini and Haxorus is a really cool duo. So Haxorus would be tier one or maybe banned if its speed were any faster than it is. Its base speed. It gets Dragon Dance and Swords Dance, so it can. But so sometimes it might not be able to run Swords Dance if your speed tiers are a lot better than his. But he has some good speed tiers around it. But with it being as fast as it is, it's still faster than Zygarde 50%. It's still faster than the Kirums. Still faster than Komo-o. And it actually puts it in a position where so the scariest dragons drafted in our league, I'm thinking the Kirums, Lotties, Komo-o, Zygarde 50%. All of them are either slower than it or floating. And so with Misty Terrain halves the damage taken from Pokemon that are receiving a dragon type move if they're grounded. So Haxorus can give off dragon moves to Megalodios at full percent, but Megalodios is doing 50% to Haxorus. Or it's in a situation where if the other dragon is grounded, then it's slower than Haxorus. The one exception being Zygarde 10%, but I don't think that's one of our top dragons.
Yeah.
Tapu Fini Haxorus is really cool. That Misty Terrain also puts him in a situation where he doesn't have to worry about statuses as much. So Thunder Waves or Will-O-Wisps aren't really as big of a deal for Haxorus as potentially other teams. His Dragon Fairy Steel Core, the other one, the Steel type is Fortress. I gave this like a B minus because I really love Fini Haxorus, and I still need to be proven about Fortress. I came into Pokemon late. I came in to competitive Pokemon Gen 7, and so Adam, you and Ian were around back when Fortress kind of was the Ferrothorn.
Oh, it was so great. Guys, Fortress gets every entry hazard, and it gets Volt Switch, and it gets Rapid Spin. And it only has one weakness, which is Fire. Um, Fortress is a really cool Pokemon. It's a little bit squishier than you want it to be with 60 special defense. And so, really, it's different than Ferrothorn or Zygarde, where they can really tank an HP, move, Hidden Power, Fire, or Ice, respectively, without kind of any worry. Whereas Fortress, most moves on the special side, even something like a Psychic from Alakazam, is going to be doing a lot. You're definitely not going to be able to take two of those. And 40 speed isn't the best for a rapid spinner. But it's still, I mean, Fortress is a really cool Pokemon. It also has Sturdy. So
Right. So if
I'm
it needs to get up just the Stealth Rocks or something, then he's fine in that sense.
right. Right. I think it loses a little bit of utility as a dedicated lead because it's so obvious to counterplay it.
Yeah.
But I think it's the type of Pokemon that if its checks go down, it can really be nasty and hard to deal with.
And this was something that before the draft, Ian and I talked, and Ian talked about how excited he was to draft Fortress. Um, so yeah, there's something there that I might not be seeing. So and then when it comes to a Fire Water Grass core, I think it's good. I think that Salazzle is such a unique fire type. It's a special. It's probably his scariest special attacker. Meloetta
Hmm.
hits harder, but I don't see Ian bringing it nearly as often as Ian brings Salazzle. Salazzle is really cool because it can toxic everything. I'm curious how that's going to go when you have Tapu Fini. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's fine. And then where's the grass Pokemon? Delmise.
It's Delmise.
Delmise is cool. Delmise is its own rapid spinner. I think it hits pretty hard. I think people are gonna underestimate how hard its grass, ghost, and steel stab moves are. So
Hmm.
so that's cool.
Um,
I think its hazards. Ian's hazards are good. I gave them a B plus because he has uh, Mega Aerodactyl, Galvantula, Fortress, Mudsdale. So kind of isn't really relying on one type of way to put up hazards every week. And then I think that the removal I actually rated a little bit higher. I gave it an A minus because I think the combination of Fortress, Tapu Fini, Delmise, and Aerodactyl is another situation where those are all pretty decent hazard removals, and none of them are. You can't just pick one Pokemon that would somehow take out all the hazard removers. So yeah.
yeah. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the speed tiers? I actually, I put my ratings together a little while back, and I'm noticing I actually gave this the best rating of about speed tiers out of any Pokemon.
Out of any
Which for me,
Pokemon?
or sorry, out of any team
Yeah.
or of any draft. It has something that's faster than base 115, something that's faster than most people's fastest thing in Mega Aerodactyl. Haxorus is faster than all the base 95s, like you pointed out. So it really it has Fini and Articuno both sitting at 85. So Fini is a fast defensive Pokemon, and Articuno, but it's free to run defensive EVs because Articuno is right there and probably going to be running offensive EVs. And Fini is probably going to drop down into the speed tier below that. It seems like Ian has a gap between 85 and 65, but actually Fini is going to be occupying that gap pretty solidly. And then he even has, 65 to 40 all the way down to 35. So I think these speed tiers are great.
Yeah, I think I graded the speed tiers a little harshly my first time around. I gave it a B minus because the I really think that I haven't really seen anyone use Meloetta that well. So I see it's like Haxorus and then Articuno, things that I would see him bring that would run speed, and then that's kind of it. Like Umbreon, hopefully he doesn't have to run speed very often. Tapu Fini, I guess if he wants to run a special like a Calm Mind variant or something, or if he wants to get off the fast defog or something or fast taunt, then maybe on Tapu Fini. But I really kind of didn't like the gap I saw between or really below Haxorus. So I gave it a bad rating. The more I've looked at it this week, the more excited I am about it. I think it's nice that Salazzle isn't being at base 117 speed, that it's still not his fastest. And I think that with Galvantula, potentially with some sticky web options, I think that he could have some fun time with the speed tiers that he has.
Oh yeah, guys, sticky webs means Ian can bring Swords Dance Haxorus instead of Dragon Dance. So yeah, better watch out for that.
Right. I guess the last thing I'll say to justify my B minus, which was once again a first impression, was that I felt like his defense was pretty passive. So there is a cool synergy between Tapu Fini and Umbreon because Tapu Fini's one drawback is that it doesn't have a recovery move as a bulky water type, and Umbreon is incredibly bulky and gets Wish. So there's a synergy there. I think his team is best when it is not giving up any sort of leeway. When it's just, or when it's not giving any leeway, it's just pressuring. And so I said that he has a pretty passive defense for what looks like a very offensive team. So,
Yeah.
but
Luckily, since we unbanned Baton Pass, Umbreon can be a lot less passive now and actually gaining momentum. Same thing with Fortress.
right,
Yeah, actually, two Pokemon that seem passive because Fortress has Volt Switch.
right.
They actually become ways to propel yourself forward. So
Yeah, I think that if
I
I was gonna say, last thing I'll say is I think that if he finds a way to with this team to get that sort of upfront offensive power, then that kind of provides the chip for Haxorus. Then I think he has a really good team. But my rating's a B minus.
yeah, I gave it a B plus. I like this team a lot. I'm excited to see how Ian uses it.
Great. Next up, Adam, why don't you talk about Las Vegas Venusaur's first round pick, Mega Gallade, and the team that Sean drafted around it?
It's so funny because so we had some votes before the season started to potentially lower Mega Gallade to tier two, and Sean originally voted against
To
or
Mega
move it
1.
from tier sorry from Mega two to Mega one.
Yeah.
And Sean originally voted against it, and then he voted for it, but it was confusing. And then we asked him again the next day, and he switched back to voting against it. So it stayed in tier two because of Sean, and then
Right.
he was able to draft it cheaper than he otherwise would have.
That's some high level strategy.
That's almost the classic Sean move in my
Right.
mind.
And my
The,
classic Sean, I also think that I trust that he didn't plan on drafting it when he voted. So
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
so what
So
are
it's
his cores?
so he's got maybe Mega Gallade, Magnezone, Sylveon. Or I guess
We
Magnezone, Sylveon,
Weavile,
Gudra,
Mega Glade,
Weavile,
Weavile.
Mega
Those are
Gallade,
good.
Weavile. Yeah, sort
Yeah,
of a physical ball breaky kind of core.
yeah.
But yeah, I guess Gudra, Sylveon, Magnezone is like a really really bulky special or defensive Dragon Fairy Steel core.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the better ones.
yeah. And one thing that's worth noting is that Sean has already made a trade. He's traded Alolan Muck for Pelipper in Tier 3. And I believe he's, not trying to make a rain team. It's just Pelipper happened to have the appropriate typing, supposedly appropriate typing and defenses for his team. That's something that I disagree with personally.
And I
Um,
agree with. I think Pelipper will be a great addition to his team. I think it gives him some more defog options, which his team's really lacking. And I think that the momentum works really well with this type of offensive team. And honestly, like having that grass type with only one traditional grass weakness, I think will help him out.
Yeah. For me, it's a matter of so trading Alolan Muck for Pelipper gives Sean now 5 rocks weaknesses. He has Crobat, Weavile, Rabombi, Rapidash, and now Pelipper.
Hmm.
And to me, Crobat and Pelipper are going to be U-turning. I cannot remember if Rabombi gets U-turn or not. But
And then he has the earthquake weakness with
um,
Dugtrio, Rapidash, Magnezone. So he's pretty edge quake weak.
Right. So I think that's going to cause some problems, especially Magnezone is one of his heavy special attackers. It kind of sucks to be quad weak to to ground there.
Mhm.
So that's too bad.
Yeah, I so part of our rubric is that we look at the cores, and I look at traditional cores as having some value to them. And this one really doesn't have a fire, water, grass core. Now he has Pelipper, which is nice, but Rapidash is tier 5. It gives him some speed, gives him some attack, but I don't think it gives him that much. And he doesn't have a grass Pokemon, um, so yeah, that's reflected in my score overall.
Yeah.
What about hazards and rock and removal?
Yeah. So I believe Alolan Dugtrio gets Stealth Rocks and Rabombi gets Sticky Webs.
Yep.
And aside from that, I'm not seeing a whole lot. He has a Steel Pokemon without Stealth Rocks, which is too bad. So I think his hazards are kind of weak. His removal options are a lot better. Crobat is an awesome defogger. Um, and Pelipper now. I said they're a lot better. Rabombi, I believe, gets defogged. So there's some fast defoggers, but all 3 of them are weak to rocks, which, I mean, I know that most defoggers are weak to rocks, but it's great to have at least one hazard remover on your team that's not
Yeah.
weak to rocks. So I see both the hazards and the removal being kind of weak, and so I think Sean's gonna struggle controlling the field.
Okay. Yeah,
In this
I think
play.
you're right, and I think that's important with the team that he has. I mean, um, I think that Weavile Mega Gallade is could be as threatening as Tapu Koko Mega Medicham. What it needs though is it needs that prior chip damage. It needs the one spike up or the one stealth rock set up. And so and then you can kind of just switch around, pivot in, get that chip damage, and then bring in your mega glade and start wreaking havoc. So yeah, I think if he really wants to get his team going on all cylinders and he wants to go the hyper offensive way, I would say he needs that he needs those hazards, and that would really help bring his team up from what I graded it at, which was a C, to honestly closer to even like B minus range. Even just with that addition.
Hmm. Yeah, I graded this a C as well. I think, yeah, there are concerns, especially the edge quake weakness. I think is one of my bigger concerns. One thing that we haven't talked about yet are the speed tiers. Sean has 5 Pokemon that are base 110 or faster, and this is to
Yeah,
me,
half of his team is greater than 100.
yeah, to me, I don't know if this is was intentional by Sean, but having Zero Aura last season, I know he enjoyed having that like really fast team. So I think you're not going to win against Sean by choice scarfing 3 things. So it might be worth investing in defense. And again, we see that huge speed gap between 105 and 80, which we saw in a few other places. And 80 is Gudra, which you're almost never going to invest speed in. And Buzzwole is at 79, which also likely will not be fully speed invest. You might see more of a like attack HP kind of set with Buzzwole or Gudra.
Right.
So I really think that there's a huge speed gap problem in that it really allows Sean's opponents to sort of not be freed to not EV to outspeed.
Right. I do think with a hyper offensive team, if he wants to go that direction, I don't think it's in it like baked into it the way that Brian's team is. If he wants to go that route, I think that the speed tiers are fine. But as is, like if he wants to go more towards less of a very specific play style, then yeah, the speed tiers, he could actually probably trade some of those higher speed tiers for maybe just like a bulkier Pokemon that sits right around in that range.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think it is a bad team. I think that it can like and because of its offensive pressure, I think that he can win a lot of games just from overwhelming his opponents.
Yeah. So moving on, why don't we talk a little bit about our second new coach, the Driftville Drapions, who
Yep.
drafted Celesteela first round.
Yep. So this was a Pokemon that I'm surprised it lasted this long. Just thinking abstractly about how early Celesteela should be drafted. But I think that it's all the picks that were picked before it were fine and worked well. And so it gave Matt a kind of privilege of being late in the draft, but still getting such a cool steel type and flying type. So, yeah, talking about the team that he built around it, I'm not convinced that it's a team that works really well for Celesteela, but they're all really cool Pokemon. So, when thinking about cores, I usually think about synergy. I don't see that kind of synergy, similar to the way that I thought that
Andy's
and
team.
yeah, Andy's team kind of doubled up on weaknesses to Landorus. I think this team doubles up on weaknesses to Celesteela with Mega Pidgeot, Alola Ninetales, Mandibuzz, um, stuff like that, which are Pokemon that you want to have on your team. And they're sharing a weakness with your first round pick. That can be kind of difficult. But I mean, Celesteela could be basically whatever you want. And as we've seen in previous seasons, I think the last 2 times Celesteela's been drafted, it's been drafted with a water ground type. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Every time it's been drafted in our league, it's been with a water ground type, and you can see why their synergy is it's perfect defensive synergy. Celesteela is immune to poison, which is the thing that water ground types fear the most.
Grass.
Well, it quad resists grass, but it's also immune to poison, so it can't be toxic, which
Oh,
is the
yeah, yeah,
thing
yeah.
that something like Gastrodon it really cripples Gastrodon. It also quad resists grass, And Celesteela is weak to fire and electric, which Gastrodon is either immune to or quad resist. So quad
Yeah.
resisting or immune to each other's um, weaknesses, which is it's crazy. It's really cool.
So that's a really cool defensive core with Celesteela and Gastrodon. When you can only bring 6 Pokemon a week, it kind of sucks though that Celesteela doesn't get Defog and Gastrodon doesn't get Stealth Rocks. Um, so it's just I for me it's like it's really really great. It also just I think puts a lot of pressure on your team building for what your other 4 Pokemon have to do. But kind of like going on from that, I think the speed tiers are fine. I think he has enough things sitting around. Maybe he could have one more thing in that sort of 100 range to 85, 70 range. But I think for the most part, they're good. I think having Mega Pidgeot faster than Alakazam is great. I think that it really kind of I think allows Alakazam to run some investment elsewhere if it doesn't want to have it all in speed. And I think it really puts Silvally in a good place to maybe not always run max speed, and with that sort of semi mythical stat line of 95 straight through. I'm interested to see how creative Matt can be with sort of his what types of Silvallis he brings.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the hazard and hazard control you see on this team.
I think Hazards is just Crystal. Is that right?
And Wheezing gets toxic spikes.
Oh, okay. So not the best. It's is tier 4 and tier 5.
Yeah.
Okay. And then but removal is fine. It's Mega Pidgeot, which is awesome. Mandibuzz, which is awesome. Mandibuzz is probably one of the better defoggers.
Mm-hmm.
And then Silvally. So that's fine. He has some good options there. And then you can set up screens with the Lola Ninetales, stuff like that. So that's really cool. I think that one thing that we haven't talked about is his Z user and Hoopa Unbound. I think
Yeah.
that he has. I think that we'll see if this is the team for Hoopa Unbound to shine. Chris had it last season and traded it before it ever did anything. I'm seeing some weakness overlap with Alakazam and Hoopa Unbound. But I think Alakazam and Hoopa Unbound is kind of a very scary offensive core with Mega Pidgeot and stuff like that. So, yeah, this team has some things working for it. I think that it has some very unique Pokemon in Alakazam, Alola Ninetales, Mandibuzz. Like, there's no substitutes to most every Pokemon on this team. Um, but I think that I would have liked those maybe the Firewater Grass core to be filled out a little bit more, just to help with some resistances and some offensive pressure. And it doesn't look like he has a dragon either, so there's some offensive pressure that's missing from that. So overall, I gave it a C plus.
And I gave it a B minus overall. And again, these are just first impressions. So, our, what we think is going to be, sort of fluctuating over time. One more thing I think that's a little bit noteworthy about this team is the lack of physical attackers. So obviously,
Oh
Hoopa
yeah,
Unbound is a great physical and special wall breaker, and it's one of the things that makes it so great. And so I wonder if Coach Matt is going to be shoehorned into running physical Hoopa Unbound often, or even bringing Crustle some weeks when he would rather not, just to sort
right.
of have that physical presence.
Silvally gets Swords Dance, but that takes a turn, and so it's kind of difficult there. Yeah, it's kind of similar to Anchorage Ninetales, where Anchorage Ninetales didn't really have many Pokemon above 100 in special attack. This is kind of the same, but
Mhm.
on attack, except provided this one has the like premier attacker with Hoopa Unbound. So,
Right.
there, so cool. You said B minus. I gave it a C plus,
Mhm.
and we'll move on to Sootopolis Salaman's coach Chris's snipe
Oh my
of
gosh.
Zygarde 50%. We went back into the archives. We found out that Chris actually did tell Adam that he was thinking about drafting Zygarde, and somehow Adam forgot about it and wound up getting on the spot, emotionally devastated. And we'll get to how Adam recovered from that. But for right now, Adam, talk about talk about this Pokemon.
Yeah, a Zygarde 50% can do everything. We saw it recently got banned from OU. And I was joking earlier, maybe it's a good thing I didn't get Zygarde 50% because now my team building is easier. I can actually practice on the OU ladder. It gets Glare, it gets Dragon Dance, it gets the best ground move in the game. It gets so many things. Wow. Subtoxic is really nasty.
Yeah, I really hope that Chris moves his Z user from Heatran to Zygarde, because honestly, Zygarde gets even scarier when its moves like Iron Tail are hitting at 100% and things like that. So
Yeah,
that's a big kind of annoyance that I have, because Zygarde is one of the scariest Pokemon in draft format, and it's even scarier with some Z usage.
yeah. So Zygarde 50% was his first round pick, and then he sort of around that picked a half Sun team. And we talked again. We talked with the Drapions and the and Coach Andy's team about doubling up on weaknesses with your first round pick. And so Chris did something similar with Zygarde 50% having a water, no, just an ice weakness, I believe. And no,
Yeah.
and dragon and fairy, but um,
It was with his Zygarde that there kind of ends up being quite a bit of
right,
weaknesses
yeah.
with.
So Zygarde, Leafeon, Decidueye, Executor share weaknesses, and then Mantine and Mega Charizard Y share a an electric weakness, which is a
And
little and a
Heatran and
rock weakness.
Heatran and Charizard Y
Right,
share the water weakness.
right, exactly. Um, yeah, so it's a little bit of weakness overlap there, and the thing that I see being the problem with that is that it might make it easy for coaches to feel like, oh well, since I've prepped against Zygarde, oh now magically my team also works for Heatran and Mega Charizard Y and Mantine and things like that. Um, so hopefully Chris is able to work around that, but I see that being something that he could struggle with this season.
Yeah, I think one thing that I noticed too is that Azelf and Espeon are the same type, and the only thing's faster than his Mega. So, like for me, that's a pretty big knock. Um, I don't think he should have both of those.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think one of them's bringing so much more that the other one should also. I don't
Right.
know.
I mean, Azelf has Stealth Rocks and U-Turn, and Espeon has Magic Bounce. And Magic Bounce is great for this team especially when you look at the other hazard removers, which are Mantine and Decidueye. And Decidueye is not weak to rocks, which is great. Um, Mantine is weak to rocks. But it's really looking at Mega Charizard Y. It's quad week, and that's sort of one of your greatest assets, especially if you have a Sun team, and it's a Sun team that you can't put Heat Rock on. Your Sun Setter,
Yeah.
so you're going to be switching it in and out a lot more often, and so having rocks off the field is hugely important. And so, especially because Zelf and Espeon overlap in type, I really see Mantine and Decidueye being the primary hazard removers, which is a little bit of a
Yeah.
problem for me.
Yeah, I think that Mantine's a good pick for the most part for this team. I mean, I don't like that it shares the weakness with Charizard Y, but yeah, I think that it really kind of becomes a little bit more of a defensive backbone to go alongside of things like Heatran and Decidueye. Yeah, what else do you think about the team? What do you think about the rest of the speed tiers?
Oh, you know me. I'm gonna I don't know. I don't know how much I want to nitpick the speed gap between the 95 and 75 from Leafeon and Heatran. And Chris,
But we know you.
yeah, Chris is obviously running a Sun team, so he's going to have Executor and Leafeon be a little bit faster, which patches up his sort of not so great top speed of 115. Um, in a Zelf. And again, he's probably not going to run a Zelf and Espeon in the same week. Or at least I think that would be a very hard sell. So, and Executor has that psychic type too. So I don't know. I see the speed tiers as being okay. It would be nice to see something faster. And
Yeah.
also there's a bit of a gap between, Leafeon and Heatran. So hopefully Chris doesn't feel like he has to run Heatran, offensive or with speed
Right.
EVs every week. Cause,
And if he gets something faster, if he does that as Zelf or Espeon trade or something like that, and he has a couple threatening Pokemon that are faster than Zygarde, then he's in a situation where he doesn't have to run max speed on Zygarde. He can run pretty defensive bulky sets.
right. Absolutely. And surely there's something in, Azelf and Espeon are both, they're tier 2 and tier 3 respectively. And so, likely you could even find a Pokemon that was fast and threatening on whichever side you want, plus a move like Defog. And so you could,
Yeah.
yeah. So, so I think that would be a suggestion that I have for Coach Chris.
One thing that you could go.
Okay. I was going to say one thing that I just noticed now is, it seems like Mantine, Zygarde, and Mega Charizard are all sort of susceptible to like toxic, as a way to wear them down. And so, I would really like to see a more reliable Heal Beller. Leafeon gets Heal Bell, but, that's going to be primarily running, like Swords Dance,
Yeah.
Chlorophyll set. So,
Does Espeon get Heal Bell?
Espeon gets Heal Bell also. Okay, you're right.
Okay.
Um,
Cool.
that's great.
Well, I think one thing that I would maybe find is it's just really hard for me with both this team and Andy's team, just this kind of two teams in one kind of weather, but not fully weather. And also it's just, I'm not sold on it yet. And I think that his team would really benefit from a good fairy. Something like Gardevoir, even though that would be another psychic type, I think it could potentially be a good fairy that could work well in here or give him some wish. I think Mega Gardevoir could be cool. I think Mega Altaria could actually work pretty fine on this team too. So those are just some suggestions that I have. I gave it a B minus just because I'm not convinced about it.
Yeah, I gave it a B. Yeah, I think, yeah, we'll see. I'm excited. I think some of the threats are really threatening. And I think, one advice I have for people, is not to sleep on Mantine. Mantine is one of the premier threats in OU, though you'll never see it, until you get to the highest part of the ladder.
Yeah.
140 base special defense, and it gets Roost. This thing is just a monster, and, it's fine if you have a check for it, but once your check goes
Right.
by the wayside, you almost can't kill it.
Yeah, if Zygarde kills your electric type,
Yeah.
what are you going to do?
Yeah, and HP Electric is not going to be doing anything to this, even though it's quad week. So, or it's going to be doing less than 50%. Yeah, just I would say really make sure you're prepping for that, or you're going to have a bad time.
Cool. I think the more I look at this team, I could definitely see myself, especially if he trades over some duplicative
To
Pokemon.
Yeah,
Then I would rate it higher. Right now, I gave it a B minus.
yeah. Okay. I guess moving on. You're the last team in the draft. That's me. Why don't
Yeah.
you tell me what you think about my team?
Yeah. So your first round pick was Manaphy, but I know that was just because you were trying to decide like between Kieran Black and some other Pokemon. And so because you had the wheel pick, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to pick Manaphy now just so I can not dip into my overage time. And then I'll spend the next 3 minutes thinking about that really kind of the first round pick that you wanted. And Kieran Black is an amazing Pokemon. It's amazing that it lasted this long. I think when you don't count megas, it's top 5 overall. And I think Manaphy's good. Adam and I, in the last recording of this, we maybe debated Manaphy a little too much on screen or on air, but Adam's a little bit hesitant about how well it's going to work on this team. I really like that he has Manaphy as some bulky setup sweeper. I think it works well with Kieran Black. I think that it kind of works with its typings. Um, I think it's his Firewater Grass Core, Rotom Heat, Seismitoad, and Ferrothorn. If I'm going to take Manaphy off of that, I think are all really awesome, kind of unique, not explicit unique, but pretty quirky typings: electric, fire, water, ground, and dragon or
Grass
grass
steel.
steel. Which really honestly make for a really cool defensive trio. It makes it hard to plant coverage moves that hit things. And then his Dragon Fairy Steel Core is honestly I think the best in the draft. Kieran Black, Clefable, Ferrothorn. Um, honestly, some of like if you said name the best fairy in draft league, I'd say Clefable. If you said name the best dragon, not counting megas, I'd say Kieran Black. If you said name the best steel type, it's either Heatran or Ferrothorn. So that's amazing. That really gave him a good boost in his overall rating at the end. Um, your fastest speed isn't the fastest,
Nope. It's I
and
have every single team has at least one Pokemon that's faster than my fastest. That's faster than my whole team.
right.
So
So where Adam gets really excited about 100 to 75, maybe grabbing as many as he did in that range meant that like if you just looked at his team, there's no speed gaps except that there's a ceiling gap. There's a gap between 111 and everyone else's fastest Pokemon. So that's going to be tough on his team. I mean, what's is he going to always have to run Choice Scarf Tauros or Rotom Heat or Hitmonchan or because anything lower than that you don't really want Choice Scarfed and you really don't want Manaphy or Kyurem Choice Scarfed. So I think that speed is going to become a detriment for him.
yeah,
Um,
I'm also nervous about speed on my team. I promised myself before the draft I'd draft at least one thing that was faster than base 115, and that didn't happen.
Busted.
I'm already planning my next draft, so
Yay.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think your hazards are some of the best, even though there's only three of them: Clefable, Ferrothorn, Seismitoad. They're three of my favorite ones, and especially in their tiers. I think Seismitoad is my favorite tier four, Ferrothorn tier two, and Clefable tier one hazards setters. And for removal, it's a little bit bleak, but still fast, still good. I think Rotom Heat is a very unique um, Defogger, and Tornadus Incarnate gets Prankster, so it's almost a promise defog.
And
So
Hitmonchan has Rapid Spin, which can
yeah,
somewhat
oh
patch
yeah,
things up, even though it'd be great to, run Thunder Punch instead of Rapid Spin, but or
but
whichever
I don't.
coverage move.
Yeah, I think that I mean we see three of our most veteran coaches elect for the Mega Threes, and Coach Adam got Mega Ampharos. We haven't really talked about it yet. I think it's going to be scary. I think that it's even just its defenses are big enough that it can kind of like Zygarde live any one hit of anything, and it's hitting you with base 165 special attack. So
Yeah.
um,
In
I
fairness
like
to Sean, who I sort of called out earlier for the sort of Mega Gallade debacle, I voted to have Mega Ampharos go down to Mega 3. So I'm equally as because Mega Ampharos was in tier 2 up and Mega tier 2 up until just
oh that's
this
right.
season. So I'm equally as guilty of that, even though I had no plans. I was planning to draft Mega Abomasnow, and when Zygarde got sniped, I had to sort of rework my plans in the middle of the draft.
Right, but I think Kieran Black and Mega Ampharos are actually really cool. Even though they're both dragons, besides fairy, I don't think they share a weakness.
Dragon,
And I think they
but
actually,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I don't think, and there's just some cool things going on there that I think are awesome. I think it's nice that Mega Ampharos is not your designated electric type either. So it's very scary. You won't want to see it on the lineup of six across from you. But I think he's in a situation where he doesn't have to bring his Mega to field an incredibly threatening team. So,
Yeah.
so yeah. I gave it an overall rating of a B. I think the things that kept the score high were your were your cores. Kind of just like this just feels like a bread and butter. Like if I read the forums on how to draft a good team, it would look like this. And then some of those things that kind of knock it down would be those speed tiers and the hazard removal.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's my concerns with my team as well. So I've been, contemplating some trades that will maybe work, and maybe you'll see some of those throughout the season.
Awesome. So that is all of the teams. Adam and I decided before the draft that we would force a tier list and also have no ties. We made sure that we forced ourselves to put them 1 through 12 and put them in a tier list. And here are our first impression tier lists. You'll see some similarities. Both of our favorite teams are the same. Um, and a lot of it's similar. I think that it would be cool if either publicly or privately you shared me and Adam some of your tier lists as well. I think they're fun, and I think it'll be interesting to reflect on them as the season progresses. One thing that I'll reiterate, I don't remember if in my pre-recorded intro I said this, so it might not be reiterated, but for me, it's reiterated because I know I said it last time on the recording that didn't work. Is that the team you draft is only a part of what is necessary to be good in draft league. You have to have a good team. You have to have so what it takes to win is a good team. Sometimes it's team matchup. How well does your team work against the other team? It's your team building, and then it's playing the actually playing Pokemon. So just because you're high in the tier list doesn't mean you'll win. Just because you're low in the tier list doesn't mean you'll lose. This is just a first impression on how we think of the 11 Pokemon that you drafted.
Yeah,
So one thing that we did also was that we kept from last season is we asked people to pick their favorites, use emojis, and 24 hours after I put that, this was your picks as a group. So the two fan favorites were the Washington Hippopotas and Baltimore Braviaries, both clocking in with I think there were some fans that community members that also voted, but like I think all of them got at least 6 favorites. And so
wow.
yeah, I'm a little bit sore that my team only got 2 favorites, but it wasn't one of my favorites either, so I shouldn't be sore. But if I'm being honest, I am.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe this is also reiterated, but this is the best draft that I think we've ever had. I think that, of the top 10 teams that have ever been drafted in our league through 8 seasons, a lot of them, a lot of the top 10 would be in this sort of draft round. So
Yeah.
congratulations to everyone. And just because you're low on this tier list or on this list of fan favorites or where we placed you, you're still almost all the teams I think are better than like any team that we drafted through the first 4 seasons.
Right.
So it's pretty exciting for me.
Yeah, and kind of included in that just some reflections on the draft as a whole. I think during the draft I said in the general I said something along the lines of like, wow, this is it was like round 2 or 3. I'm like, wow, this is actually looking like a real draft and in all caps real in how I said it. But it's I really think that I guess in previous seasons, Adam and I have talked about like, okay, what is the league's meta? Where are we at as a league? Oh, we're learning. A few seasons ago, it was like, oh, we learned the value of defense, and we saw a lot of people just win because they couldn't lose. And then as we've progressed, we've seen different kind of realizations as a group, a collective realization. And I honestly think that this draft was very much I think we saw like a maturation of the teams that we've drafted. Most all of them had a very consistent identity, and you could tell just by looking at 11 Pokemon what was going on, which is incredibly exciting, and I think like puts us in a good spot to start 2019. And I think we've already seen now most of the week one matches have occurred. We've already seen that when you have sort of like this maturation, it is also showing up in the types of battles, what types of things are going on in the battle. So I was honestly very hopeful after the draft that we had.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's good to feel like this is the eighth season that we've had this league, and so I think it's good for everyone to feel like we're maybe moving in a direction. People are getting better, and even if it feels like, oh, I won, 4 games last season, and won 4 games the season before. Well, everyone is getting better, and that's you included. And so, even if your record doesn't reflect it, just remember that everyone's getting better.
Right. And last season we saw a lot of teams lose. I think there was that huge bubble. It was like around the end of the season, there were like 6 teams in contention for the last 3 spots. And I think we'll see that this season. It'll be interesting too to see how many of those become matchup dependent. So will the hyper offensive teams, that kind of quality is pretty notorious for crushing balance and bulky offense, but can't break through stall. And the stall can't really deal with the bulky offense and the weather teams and stuff like that. So it'll be I think that no team is going to have a breeze this season, and I think we'll see a lot of these sort of like rock paper scissors style results where maybe I beat you, Adam, and you beat someone else, and then that person beats me. So I'm excited to see where the season goes. So
Yeah, me too.
so we're gonna end off. Adam and I are gonna talk a little bit about our goals for this season. I'll just go ahead and list all of mine and talk about them for a little bit, and then Adam, you can do the same. So I want to start my season 3-1. I realized last season for me having, if I'm going to have a record based goal, it should never be contingent on a specific week. So I don't think it's very helpful to have a goal of like, oh, I want to win this week, or oh, I need to win against Adam next week or something like that. I think it's always better to think of it in terms of like either a trend and think of it in longer time periods than 1 week. So I went with 4 weeks. I was like, okay, we have kind of like 3 parts to the season. The opening third of the season, I want to start with a 3-1 record. Last season I started 1-3 and really had to battle back to make it in. So this one I want to start off on a good foot. And then I want to not bring the same set twice in the regular season. I have a couple unique Pokemon like Jirachi. I would feel so bad if I drafted Jirachi and then ran the same set every week or at least twice. So I'm gonna have a soft goal of not bringing the same set. I want to kind of content and related to the league, but not to my battling. I want to produce at least 3 videos for the league. I was like, okay, we have 11 weeks. Maybe every once a month, I could hopefully put a video out, including this
Hey,
one.
Kyle,
So
does this count as 2 videos?
no, this is the other one that was never produced apparently. So this counts as the first video. But if this one fails and we have to re-record, then yes, it counts as 3 videos. And then I quit making videos forever. So
Right.
and then my last thing is I want to learn a new play style. 2 seasons ago, I won the championship with a hyper offensive team of Metacham, Coco. Last season, I won it with a balanced team, Latias and Clefable. And so this season's a little bit more bulky offense. I don't really have the defense that I had last season. I don't really have the offense that I had 2 seasons ago. And with that comes a learning curve. And I want to take that learning curve and like kind of figure out what it means to actually play this style. So those are my season 8 goals.
Yeah, I have a couple season 8 goals too. So, and I think this first one could be a good goal for everyone is to everyone who played last season is to beat at least one person that you lost to in the previous season. It's I think it's important to have some goals that are a little small. I could say beat everyone that I lost to in season 7. But I lost to a lot of good players, and it's not obvious that I'm going to even beat any of them because every matchup is difficult. And so I think that's going to be something that will make my season successful is by winning at least one matchup that I lost in season 7. One in-game goal that I have, so I'd like to do this in every match that I play, is as new conditions arise, reassess my win con, which sort of means something like, say I was saving Rotom Heat to take out a water type, but then the water type goes down. It's like, okay, well now let me think, do I need Rotom Heat still? Like, so if I need a sack in 3 turns, maybe I don't have to take all of my time figuring out what my sack can be because I remember, oh, I don't need Rotom Heat anymore. Sort of things like that. Reassessing your win cons are just like where you are at and like what is the usefulness of each Pokemon and do I have checks for this thing still. So that's one. I have another a team building goal, which is to utilize every status well. So I think I use Toxic and Burn pretty easily and pretty consistently, and I can plan around that. But I have a hard time using Thunder Wave, and so I really want to sort of bring that into the fold of my playing.
That's cool.
And that, yeah.
Sorry, I was re-looking at that. And I was like, oh, that's a great goal. And I think it's just true that it's like they all have their own perks. So I think part of utilizing them well will be like, okay, when should I use this one and not this one?
Yeah. So the last 2 seasons for my next goal, my goal is to go 3-2 in the last 5 weeks of the regular season. The last 2 seasons, I've done really well at the beginning of the season and then completely fallen off at the end of the season. Last season, I lost 4 of my last 5 games. And then my first week in the playoffs. In the season before, I think I lost 4 of my last 5 games or 4 of my last 6 or something like that, and then lost 2 weeks in a row in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I'd really like to end the season on a strong note. Sort of on that note, I've never won since we implemented playoffs. I've never won a first game in the playoffs. I've never advanced in the playoffs. In fact, my win last season in the consolation of, for 5th place, that was the first playoff game that I've won in this league. So I'd really like to advance in the playoffs this season.
Right. Get to at least the semifinals.
Right.
Unless you're one of the top 2 teams, then in order to advance would mean to get into the finals.
Right.
So
yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's it. Adam, do you have any last things before we sign out?
No. Good luck. I'm excited for this season.
Great. Go Buckeyes.